Hi, I'm Jenna, and I help you set your boundaries to protect your peace without the guilt. And today I want to talk a bit more about invisible illness in a longer video, but I don't just want to talk about the symptoms today. I want to talk about the parts that people often don't see, the emotional impact that that has on us, and the impact it can have on our relationships, the grief that comes from being diagnosed and having to live with a debilitating invisible illness that could be lifelong, for which there is no cure. The assumptions that people make, the boundaries, of course. And because one of the hardest things about invisible illness is that people don't often believe what they can see. And if they can't see it, then, they can't underestimate it. So we've talked about, well, you don't look sick. And society's expectation of what illness should look like, is that you should appear sick, you should sound sick, you should be in such a state that you can't get up and walk and function. You should feel clogged up, or you should look visibly worn out. And when that appearance doesn't quite fit the standard that society sets for us, it becomes very hard for people to believe that we are in fact unwell. And appearance is not a diagnosis, okay? And we become incredibly good at masking our symptoms because we show up even when we're tired, and we show up and we smile and we engage and we go to all the events and we do all the things. And we're so good at performing wellness because we only get one shot at life, don't we? So we have to get out there and enjoy things. We don't want to be defined by the illness, so we will push on some days, but that costs us greater later on down the line. And we have good days. We have good days. Sometimes we have good weeks and good months, and then we have bad days. And many people only see me during the moments that I'm able to actually show up. They don't see my recovery afterwards unless they're very intimately close to me, like my partner or my children or some very close friends. And they don't see the planning that goes into that. And they don't see, the personal cost to me in doing so. There also comes with, there's an exhaustion that comes with constantly having to explain yourself. You're constantly having to repeat your story. Hi, I'm Jenna. Yeah, I have fibromyalgia, so I'm so sorry. Like, it appears as though I'm not paying attention, but sometimes at this time of day when it hits 3 o'clock, things just don't go in my head, and I'm struggling to retain information. Sorry, my speech slurs after 5 o'clock most days. I really struggle to get my words out. I'm so sorry, I forgot to do the thing this morning. I'm going to have to do that again tomorrow. I know it's still early afternoon, but I can feel myself shutting down, and I'm not going to be able to concentrate on the task at hand that I need to get done today. You're constantly repeating the story. You're constantly feeling the need to educate people on what it is, even though they might have heard it before. It's not going into their brains, and they're not understanding it, and they're not sticking with you on it. You're constantly having to defend your limitations, and you're constantly in a state where you're having to ask like really intrusive questions, such as, well, when did you get your diagnosis? Are they absolutely sure that's what it is? Could it be something else? What kind of medication are you on? These are all deeply intimate, impertinent questions that society has completely normalized asking person with a disability. And we don't randomly just walk up to people and demand to know what's in their medical records. You know, if somebody wants to share if they have IBS, or if they have had a hernia, or if they have had something wrong with their arms or their legs, or maybe they've got a blood thinning disorder, maybe they've got an infection in their blood, all sorts of stuff. We don't randomly walk around telling people that we've got UTIs or an STI or something to that effect. You don't generally share that information. And if you do share that information, well, then good for you. But it also doesn't allow the other person at the other end to start asking you more impertinent questions. It's your journey to share. And I think for a lot of people, people with disability, certainly invisible disability, is something that I've witnessed a lot throughout my life, and I've seen people suffer through that. And when I say suffer, I don't mean the illness. I'm talking about, the way people treat them and the fact that everybody feels entitled to an explanation. It's almost like society feels like they own the disabled community and that they have the autonomy and the right to decide whether or not you're disabled enough or you're sick enough, the right to use a toilet or a parking space or any of these things. I won't get political or put my own agenda in there. What I will say is that with regards to that, I was actually having a conversation very recently with my partner, and as it turns out, as a result of the illness that I have, I'm entitled. I'm entitled to have a blue badge. Now, I don't drive, but it would be a handy thing to have, sure. Now, I've made a conscious decision not to apply for my blue badge because at this time, I do not need it. I do not, very, very, very seldom during a flare up do I get an absolute urgency where I feel like I need to go to the toilet. It used to be quite bad years ago, and I'm telling you, it probably would have been handy years ago, but I don't need it. And I personally, whether I'm entitled to it or not, I don't want to take something from someone that I don't need and someone else is having to wait their turn for that parking space. I personally don't feel like I need it. That being said, I'm not here to preach to you. Maybe you're a person that's entitled to it and just takes what you're entitled to. If you're entitled to it, then that is your absolute right to do so. But you also have the choice not to. And that is the other thing. I've met lots of people that are like, oh, you're entitled to it, then you should take it. And that's fine if it sits well with you within yourself. But if I've been able to manage up until this point and I can self-manage certain aspects of my life without additional support, I'll take it, because as I've said before, I might have a disability now, but I will not be defined by it, not by a long stretch. That said, there may come a day where my illness gets to a point where it starts to speak for me and the autonomy of my decisions become less my own. So I will continue to make my own free thinking choices and look after myself in the way that I need to care for my body until such times as my body decides for me, almost on a permanent basis. I still have some element of control, not complete control, but with the right amount of self-care, I am able to manage it that bit better. And that brings me to the grief that no one talks about, because grieving the life that you expected for yourself. I've probably been living with fibro for a great number of years. And honestly, when I used to have dreadful flare-ups, I would be in crutches, especially when I was pregnant as well. I used to really struggle to walk around. And see, when I showed up to family functions with a walking aid, see the eye rolls I used to get, and the looks and the comments from relatives, from people that should have cared a bit more. They just looked at me and they looked at my weight and they looked at my age and they just thought, that's pathetic. The pathetic. And I've had flare-ups and chronic pain for more years than I care to imagine, but it's the body that I've inhabited and it's the body that I knew that I grew up in. And it wasn't until something triggered it more so a couple of years ago, and I noticed that the symptoms were getting so much worse, particularly, and not just the pain. This is why, I could never have imagined it would have been something like fibro, because I didn't tick all the other boxes. I was always a bit of a scatterbrain, wandering into the kitchen and forgetting why I was there. But it started to get really bad. And I started to notice that my cognitive function is quite impaired, especially when we hit a certain time of day. And when I get to kind of the 3 o'clock stage every day, my body shuts down and I just need to rest for a bit. And sometimes I'll get that little bit of rest before I pick my kids up, and other times I'll push through a little bit and then I regret it, and then I need a wee bit of a lie down whenever they come home. It is, and then sometimes, I can feel more refreshed from a nap than I do from a full night's sleep. And my speech will slur, but I'm also running hand in hand with PTSD. Again, I would say that PTSD is an invisible illness, except I would say that when it is triggered, my symptoms are very visible. So there's a part of me that I don't feel overly comfortable sharing, because PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a form of mental illness brought about by trauma or a traumatic event. And I want to very much keep what that does to me to myself, but my symptoms are extremely visible. One of the reasons that I always tend to have my hair down is when I get a little bit anxious and I talk about things, I can break out in what look like little tiny midgy bites. In Scotland, I don't know if they look like tick bites in other countries, but they're little itchy sores that I get all over my neck and my chest, and they're called hives. My body is producing so much histamine under the stress and pressure. I go completely non-verbal. My mouth starts to feel as though the dentist has put an injection in, and I get that overwhelming sense of numbness and I can't feel my tongue, the insides of my mouth, and I start to really slur my speech. I'm not very good at putting it on, but something like that. And it doesn't swell up. That's the strangest thing, but that I have noticed. And yet I do bite my tongue, and it provides more pain, and then it starts to swell from there. That can last a period of maybe 10 minutes up to, I think the most it's ever lasted is about 10 hours. It can last a very long time. And these symptoms of not being able to cope in an environment is what helps me decide whether or not I'm going to engage or go out or do that speech today. Now, I am, as part of my job, I'm a writer. I am an author and poet, a playwright, but I also do a great deal of public speaking in what I do. And I do a great amount of public speaking, and I can speak at conferences and be a keynote speaker or school assemblies, and I can do that for a period of up to about 90 minutes. And what I've noticed in the last 2 years is when I am talking, and I was always very confident, and I still am, to get up there and do that, but my body doesn't recognize with my illness that actually I'm safe. I know I'm safe. So while I'm doing this, my face is completely flushed. It's going bright red. I look like a beetroot. All across my chest goes extremely red. I break out in hives, and my psoriasis on my arms flares up enormously. So I cover that up by using my hair. Sometimes I'll wear a scarf, long sleeves. I'll wear a high cut top to hide that, because people can visibly see that and they start to get distressed on my behalf. And that's not helpful to me, because I know I'm safe and I know I'm fine, but my body is reacting because my body is remembering something that it was once taught. And this is a part of the reason that my tagline is Your Body Remembers. I've also written a book called Her Body Remembers, and a lot of that goes into the abuse, emotional abuse, sexual assault, all kinds of things. It is a poetry book, but it is very much a story in itself that you could read in a sitting. And it talks about how the body has reacted, how my body has changed so much as a result of what has happened to me. And as a result of what has happened to me in my life with the relationships that I've had with certain people, I have subsequently been diagnosed with 2 illnesses that I will have to live with my life long. So when people question why have you cut people out your life, is that not a bit drastic? Well, learning to navigate with illnesses that were manufactured by a life that I once had is reason enough. And it's also reason enough when these people don't show any empathy, hold no accountability, and have no desire to help support me through it. So that to me is a very toxic environment, and I'm very much on my own in trying to rehabilitate my life and to help others do the same. And I've got to say, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving through it, and I'm enjoying about it. But there is a grief that comes with the life that you expected to have. And I know that when I left my old life behind and the people in it, that I expected so much of what I could do and get out there and do. And I was doing quite a bit of it for a while, and I had so many ideas of the things I wanted to do, and I would sign myself up for things and sign myself up for opportunities, and then I'd get there and actually find out that my body doesn't have the capacity to carry through what it is that I wanted to do. And there is a real grief in that. I had applied just for a bit of extra income over Christmas with my first year of being a single parent last year. In addition to what I already do, I decided that I wanted to take on an extra job. I lasted 11 days. My body was so broken, and I had triggered the fibro to a point where it made all its decisions for me, and that's when the symptoms got really bad. And I was very lucky. I got my diagnosis. I appeared, I think, at the doctor's on the 22nd of December, and I said, I need you to take a look at me, and I'm not going to back down or back off until we find out what's wrong with my body, because I am 37 years old. I was at the time of 38. And I was 38. I'm 38 years old. And even all these things, oh, you're so young, you shouldn't be ill. And even in my head, I should be young. I should be relatively fit and healthy. And there's no excuse for me not to be. And there was a grief that came with that, because my body did not allow me to do the things that I wanted it to do. And it's the first time in my life that I really noticed it. And I was very fortunate. Within the 6 weeks, all the tests had been complete. My GP was more than happy to take me in, listen to me, take my lead. And he seemed pretty confident from the beginning that fibro is what it could be, in addition to what I already had, which was a diagnosis for the PTSD, amongst other things. So there's been missed opportunities. There's a lack of spontaneity to my life now. And I love to be the person that's like, let's go just do this right now. And to a degree, I can still be like that, especially on the sunshining days. But both with PTSD and fibro, I really have had to draw that back quite a bit. It's a very, very difficult thing to live with. My career goals have changed, but just very recently I saw a post for a job that looked absolutely perfect for me. It was a freelance writing position, and I thought, wow, I get paid to write part-time, a pretty decent wage, whilst also working on my other stuff and doing everything that's important to me. And it would allow me the opportunity to get out there and do the things that I actually want to do that I can't afford to invest in myself. So it seemed like a no-brainer. So career goals have changed. The career goals are more gentle. They're still ambitious, but they're gentle. They're not your Monday to Friday 9 to 5. Relationships. The lack of understanding and the lack of empathy from relationships, whether it be siblings, parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, partners, children, whoever it is in your life that's causing you that distress, that's always making you prove yourself. There is a grief that comes with that, especially if this is something that you've not always lived with. What if this is something that you're now living with? You're grieving the life that you had, and people often struggle, I think, to adapt to this new version of you that once was very capable, that is a wee bit less capable in some areas now. And we are then defined and judged by it. And it's a really, really difficult thing. But the right people come into your life, and the right people stay, and they understand. And I would say that to a degree, it is a good idea to surround yourself on occasion, not all the time, with people that really understand how you feel. I've not engaged with support groups or anything like that, but I've certainly known a lot of people that have had fibro, and I found it tremendously comforting to reach out to these people when I was diagnosed, just for a wee bit of information. Information I kind of already knew, but I still needed someone just to get how I felt, People just assume that grief only follows a death, and that's not true. Grief comes in all forms, and it can also follow the loss of health and the loss of a live relative as well, if you've had to cut people out of your life. Now, another huge topic that I feel I have to cover for invisible illness is guilt. The amount of time that people spend feeling guilty with invisible illness is unfathomable. Cancelling the plans, feeling guilty for needing rest, feeling guilty and having to apologise for needing help or for having to ask for help, or worse still, changing plans again and again. And also just guilty and having to apologise for no longer being the person that you once were. And that also taps back into the grief as well, because you're grieving and mourning a body and a person that doesn't exist, a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. And you're honestly just on edge having to discuss this all of the time, and it can be very, very difficult. We can carry shame for things that are completely and utterly beyond our control, which is Very upsetting indeed. It's still quite raw, I think, for me. I have less people to apologise to, and I feel as though the people that are in my life now have known me as I am in my state of being now, and I'm surrounded by very good, very empathetic and loving people. So, we want to talk about boundaries and invisible illness. Now, this links directly back to the things that I've been saying before. So, learning to say no. No is really important. You don't have to be rude about it. You just need to be direct. No, that's not going to work. I don't have the capacity. Not today. I'm not saying no completely. I'm saying no, not today. Not today. Another day. I just don't have the capacity today. I really need to rest. I need my rest. I need to leave. You could be somewhere, you're all of a sudden you just coming into crash mode. You know it's going to take you 40 minutes to get home. I need to leave. And then the other one, I need support. I need some help. Can you help me, please? I'm not going to manage the groceries today. Could you help me with that? Do you know, I'm really, really struggling. Physical exhaustion today. Could you help me fold my laundry, please? And how illness often forces boundaries upon people really as well. Because my body taught me that boundaries before I really understood boundaries, I feel. And it can be an extremely difficult thing to live with. Having an invisible illness shouldn't be as testing as it is, but it does. It doesn't just test us, it tests your limits. It tests your emotional and physical capacity. It tests your relationships. It tests it tests your relationship that you have with your GP and how believed and heard and advocated for you are. Now, as I've said before, I'm one of these examples. I've got to say that I'm extremely grateful to my GP and the GP practice that I'm with. It doesn't matter which doctor I get there, whether it's a locum or a resident GP that is a practitioner there full time. From the administration staff on the phone to the nurses, all the way through, myself and my children have had nothing but the best care. And I feel like in today's day and age, with the backlogs with NHS and everything else, it is enormously difficult for people. They don't often have that. And I've been very fortunate. When I got my diagnosis as quickly as I did, and as I say, there'd been a long-standing medical history there anyway, and assumptions were made through that as well as the testing. And I didn't have an extraordinarily long wait for a rheumatologist. We actually bypassed that entirely. They were convinced that that's what I had, and there was no need to go and see a rheumatologist based on the test that I'd had done. But I'd started the process for this about 2.5 years ago, and as soon as they found out that I had, I think it was a B12 and something else deficiency, they gave me folic acid. They gave me pills to go on, and once I'd run the course with the vitamins and the supplements for 4 months, my numbers reached back to where they were meant to go. But I just assumed that testing would resume, and it didn't. And then what happened was I waited and my symptoms got significantly worse, which brought me back to the doctor. And I thought, I don't want to stop just because you found a deficiency in me. I want to keep going. And I was very fortunate that all my work came back fine. So I'm otherwise a very healthy person. I've got a very healthy heart. There's no underlying health concerns. That's a fantastic start. I just have a body that's in chronic pain all the time and can't quite function in the same way that I would like it to be able to do. And I'm an ambitious person who wants to get an enormous amount of stuff done. And I do find it rather difficult. And I feel like I'm now at a stage where I am kind of grieving a body that I once had. I maybe didn't take the best care of my body as I should have done, but that's not the reason that we get fibro. And I look after her much better now. And I do. I take better care of her now. So we also wanted to talk about relationships as well. So we've got friendships. how understanding are our friends when we need to cancel? Because this is one of the things, sometimes we need to cancel plans, push them back, and then we become that unreliable friend. We become the liability, the one that people don't want to make plans with, or the people that find themselves saying, oh, we'll not invite, such and such because she'll get too tired and we can't do this. Now, I've got a friend that's got fibro, and even before I knew that that's what I had, she had been suffering for a number of years. We weren't sure if it was fibro, ME, that sort of thing. And she got her fibro diagnosis at very long last. And she's since moved quite far away. And at the weekend there, she came down to visit. And during that visit, I was thinking to myself, well, she was only meant to be coming down for a few hours, but it's a very long drive there and back, and she gets phenomenally tired. And so I'd said, look, pack a bag. And if you're too tired, you may stay overnight. I'm not fit for guests. I don't have a spare room. But if you're unable to manage, you have a couch here and you're very welcome to stay over. And if when you come here, you're exhausted and you need to have a nap, that's okay. I can take the kids to the park and nip out, or we can make ourselves scarce and stay quiet if you need a wee lie down. That is coming from a person that understands. But I understood and had that empathy prior to even having the fibro. But I absolutely now can understand what kind of pain she must be in, how tired she must be feeling, because that is now lived experience. But I existed as that person long before anyway. So having good friends is essential. Having friends that are like, it's okay. We were a friend of mine who does not have fibro was driving us somewhere. I can't remember. She's driven us on quite a few trips and holidays and whatever. She likes to be the driver. And I was just exhausted in the car and my speech was starting to slur. And she's like, Jenna, just put your seat back. Just, you have a wee rest. It's fine. Just go to sleep. And I felt guilty and I felt rude. She was taking us on holiday. She was taking us on this trip. I was meant to be like managing the music and, managing the snacks. And she let me have a sleep. God love her. And that sort of friendship that makes you feel safe, those are the ones that you want to be looking out for, not the ones that are constantly questioning and demanding to know more information and questioning the state that you're in all of the time. Family, well, I have to say, obviously I've done a bit of research on this. I've spoken to other people and I've made some notes about what I want to talk about today, but my experience with family might not be the same as other people's. There are situations where I feel that family have been very supportive and understanding, but family are quite often the ones that will roll their eyes and tell you that you're too young and that you just need to get fit or you need to lose weight and find an excuse to shame you out of your illness, because that never works really. And family can sometimes, they can be a tremendous support, I believe, but in my case, not so much. And my experience was that they were not empathetic. They did not understand. This was not a lived through experience for them. And so, if you explained that you were just too exhausted to do that or too tired, I always felt so exhausted. And the one part of my life that has got better since cutting out and walking away from family has been, I don't have to over explain myself. And that has eliminated a huge part of the exhaustion from my life. I'm not as exhausted as I once was based on that one tiny thing. I do sometimes still over explain, but that comes from a deep-rooted need of having to over-explain myself anyway. So that's more of a habit. Dating, well, it's best to be honest, is what I would say. I feel like when I met my partner about a year ago now, it'll be a year ago in a couple of weeks actually, that I needed to hit him with the handbook on how to handle me. And I just went in and was very honest. And I didn't go in and go, oh, by the way, hey, I'm Jenna and I have PTSD and I may have fibro and I suffer from chronic pain. And because I didn't have my fibro diagnosis then, but what I did have was I did have debilitating pain. I did have like kind of that cognitive, like slowing down. I need naps, I need rest, I need all this kind of stuff. And I feel like I covered this in the first couple of dates because it just came out, but also we need to remember back then, we were spending like 8 or 9 hours at a time with each other, and you can cover an awful lot of ground in that time. Plus, right at the start, you're spending 5 or 6 hours on the phone as well, so you're spending a whole week's worth of worky time, 40 hours in those 3 days, just spending time getting to know this person that you're very excited about, who could start to become a bigger part of your life. And I do think that that's not something that should just come out. There were certainly things that I didn't share at the beginning because I didn't feel like they were that important, until it became a flare up and I went, oh my God, I'm having a flare up. Yeah, this happens to me, and blah, blah, blah. And I just felt that being honest was great. And I think how you market that, and how you market yourself, and how you speak about yourself is really important, because if you just walk in and go, yes, I have all these disabilities, these are all the things that are wrong with me, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not unable, and I'm not uncapable. I can still do things, but explaining that actually, well, this is my limit, this is my capacity. I wouldn't be able to do this 2 days in a row. If we were going away, then I would need to make sure that things were planned, like routes and walks, that maybe we'd want to get a taxi there so as we could enjoy a walk back, or just to conserve some energy, so that when we get to the beach, I can actually enjoy it, and the traveling hasn't actually exhausted me too much or stressed me out. Just making, allowances for that. And if somebody likes you and is invested in you, then they'll take the time to get to know you and understand your body and your patterns. And I have hit gold when I say that my partner is very understanding. And we rarely discuss it, because it's just accepted that I need rest, or I don't need to over explain, and the same goes for him as well. So we don't really need to talk about it. So we've moved in from dating to partners, which is where I was going to go next. A partner should understand and be loving and helpful and supportive when they need to, but also they should be recognizing when you're not okay. They should be getting to know you well enough to understand that they can see it, and in some cases they can maybe see it coming, and they'll maybe say things like, if you don't slow down, you're going to burn out. And sometimes that can feel like a criticism, but if that is coming from someone who knows you well and loves you, then my advice would be listen to those people, because they want what's best for you, and they don't want you to burn out, because they've seen that version of you, and that version is not the best version of you. So who's adapting for you? Who understands you? Who disappears, when it gets difficult? Who makes your illness about themselves, and who believes you? And this is where many people discover the quality of their relationships, when you ask yourself those kinds of questions. So the comments that people need to stop making, and I've noted them down, are examples like, you don't look sick, everyone gets tired, you're too young to be ill, have you tried ... insert unwarranted, unsolicited suggestions and advice. Maybe it's just stress. It's just undermining you completely. But you were fine yesterday. Oh, that was my mother's favourite. Oh, it still clenches my stomach when I hear it. I don't hear it now. She was the only person to really ever ask me that, or state that. You were fine yesterday. Aye, I was. Probably after seeing you, that's what flared me up. That was a bit below the belt, but it's also true. So you need to explain to people why these comments can feel extremely invalidating, but you also have to understand that if you have a presence in your life, for example, like my very unempathetic, emotionally avoidant mother, for example, that you're never going to get through to some people, and they're never going to understand. And you need to be able to recognize actually which ones are worth speaking to and which ones are not, because some people do come from curiosity and a place of care, and they want to learn, and other people just don't give a shit. So you need to be able to recognize that. So the pressure to be inspirational, here's another one. Okay. People often expect disabled or chronically ill people to be positive and to be brave and inspirational all of the time. No, all the time. Because actually, sometimes you're just simply surviving and getting through a day, and that's enough. And you don't owe anyone that uplifting engagement or story every day. You don't have to be an inspiration and do it better to inspire other people. Sometimes you just don't have the capacity or the energy, and quite frankly, you might just not want to. Self-worth beyond your productivity. Now, as I've said before, not in this video, but in a short, that our society praises productivity, and people tend to work with, they tie that in with worth. They tie your worth to your achievements, your work, your productivity, your output, and all these things. But invisible challenges do change, like, invisible illness, challenges that enormously. And so the question you have to ask is, who are you when you can't do everything that you used to do? And that's often where real self-worth work begins. And you can start to hear it now, actually. You can start to hear me slurring my words a little bit. The time of day that I'm recording this to put this out is not the time of day that I post it. And this is a clear sign that I need to come to the end very soon, because that will just keep happening. But that's, your self-worth is not tied to the amount of productivity that you put out there. I want to close with the things that I wish that people understood. Now, I'm very much beyond trying to get people to understand. You either meet me where I'm at or you don't. But for the people that cannot speak up for themselves, perhaps I'm touching on something here. I wish people understood that invisible doesn't mean it's imaginary. It's real. I know it's real, and I see you, and I understand. I wish people understood that rest is not laziness. It's not. And yet, I still explain to my children and to my partner, look, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to need to have another wee rest just now, because I feel like I'm not going to get through this next bit. And they keep cutting me off because they keep going, Mum, Jenna, you don't need to explain. We understand. But you've been criticised and put down and not believed and asked to be proven your worth so much that you still feel that even those people that do understand you, you're constantly having to over explain to them. Cancelling, I wish people understood about cancelling. Cancelling doesn't mean that I don't care. In fact, cancelling probably means that I'm racked with shame and guilt and really gutted, genuinely gutted, that I'm missing out on the thing that I really was excited about doing, that I cared about at the time enough to book and go ahead with it. Cancelling can sometimes, if I'm being honest, be an absolute relief to me, because I'm like, oh, I really didn't want to today. But most of the time, it comes from a place of feeling pretty gutted. Belief that costs you nothing. I wish people understood that to be believed just costs nothing. It costs you nothing just to believe what I'm saying. I'm in pain, I'm too tired, I'm exhausted, I have to cancel today. And I wish people understood that your kindness really does matter. I know people say, oh, be kind and or remember to be kind, but do we really understand what that means? Your kindness matters, your empathy and your understanding and how you treat people with invisible or chronic illness really does matter. And I wish people understood that not every single struggle is visible. Unlike the PTSD, you can't see the tiredness, you can't see the pain, you can't see what I'm struggling with on a day-to-day. And that does sometimes require an explanation depending on who I need to give it to. And we're exhausted of having to explain ourselves, aren't we? So living with an invisible illness has taught me many things. It's taught me about grief. It's taught me about acceptance that other people's attitudes and views will sometimes never change, and acceptance that this is the body that I now inhabit. And while I don't have to fully embrace that, because I might want to push back against it if I'm feeling rebellious at times, I have accepted that this is the hand that I've been dealt, and I choose to live alongside it and try not to let it debilitate my life too much if I can help it. It's taught me more about boundaries as well, and that the boundaries can sometimes speak for themselves and not just the ones that I want to set. My body has the right and will say no, and has no consideration for me in doing so. It's taught me which relationships feel safe most of all. That's the biggest takeaway I feel that I've noticed, is that it really has taught me who are the safe people in my life and who are not. And perhaps most importantly, it's taught me to listen when my body speaks. I really have paid attention, even if just for the last 6 months, I've really been paying attention to when my body speaks to me. And it makes a difference. My experience is real, whether people understand that or not. And if you live with an invisible illness too, your experience is real as well. Protect your peace. Your body remembers. Thank you for watching. And if you have any suggestions of what you'd like me to dive into next, anything else you feel you would like me to elaborate on, please do help me build my community by leaving some notes in the comments for me, and I will look forward to engaging with you on the other side.